Good evening, everyone. Hi, this is Sherry Sims, founder of Black Career Women's Network, and thank you for tuning in for another Wednesday night of Career Conversations. Tonight, we're going to be talking about knowing who you are as a professional. This is a very touchy subject, not necessarily because it hurts people's feelings, but it really takes a lot of thought to think about who we are as a professional. And it really depends on, where we are in our stage of life as well, in terms of life and in our careers. So this is what we're going to be talking about tonight in terms of, where you are. And I want to hear about where you are professionally in your career. First, before we get started, I wanted to welcome all you ladies who are new, or this is the first time you've been to one of our Google Hangouts, welcome. And if you're not a member, please join our network at bcwnetwork.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram. I say it every week. We're all over the place. So make sure that you follow us. Tonight, we're going to actually do something a little different, or adding something new to what we're doing. We're going to be taking questions from some of our members who are following us on Twitter. So if we don't have any questions in the box and we have something via Twitter, then I'm going to be answering those. So and I'll be sharing them also with the network as well. But first, let's go back and talk about who you are as a professional. What does that mean? Why does that sound so intimidating to some people? Who you are as a professional. And, if you want to identify with that, jump in, ask questions. That's what we're for, is the dialogue. It's about all of us sharing our experiences, sharing how we feel about this topic, and let's learn from each other. I remember when there was a coworker of mine I just worked with probably about 10 years ago, and she was asked this very question. And when she was asked this question in the job interview with another company, she secretly was going to, and she was coming to work and saying, Sherry, I might get the job. This is how the way she said, but they asked me, who am I as a professional? And I said, really? That's a strange question. I thought that's kind of strange. But it really was not a strange question. Honestly, it was the question that more than likely, she just never really recognized herself and what she really brings to the table as a professional based on our experience. And what happens is that if you don't believe in who you are, if you don't feel like you have that self-worth as a professional, it's hard to identify and describe who you are as a professional if you're clueless, absolutely clueless on what that means. So let's talk about that. A lot of times people hear the word professional worth and they think salary. They think, oh, well, that means that I'm making six figures now. I've made it. And a lot of successful people who have good careers are not making six figures, because it's not always about the money. It's about the impact that you're making in the job. Are you working in your strengths, managing your weaknesses? Are you really are you adapted to the company culture, or you're not feeding into the negative pieces? So it's a lot of things that take place or combined in terms of how you can describe yourself as a professional. So when she was telling me about I asked her again, I said, so how did you to explain that question? How did you ask them or explain who you are as a professional? She said, I didn't know what to say. And I said, well, you had to say something. And she said, I just told them what I currently do. Okay, and that's fine. But for a lot of you out there, you probably are familiar with the term 30-second commercial or 30-second debut. I like to call them 30-second debuts when you're in the interview process. But a 30-second debut. And that's where you have an opportunity to tell yourself or say who you are as a professional to that employer. That's in an interview. But what if you are already in a work environment and where you're trying to establish a specific reputation or build a specific brand, is what they call them now, for yourself? How are you going to do that? And how are you going to explain who you are as a professional in terms of what you bring to the table? How can you really impact what, that company and their initiatives, and still at the same time meet your own goals? Because it's important that you also achieve what you're looking for as well. I'm going to move my camera around just a little because I feel like I'm kind of half in the screen here, you guys. So, all right. So So let's talk about that. Number one, for someone who is a college graduate just coming out of college, who you are as a professional is probably going to be the most difficult for you to describe because you haven't really built that professional portfolio yet. The best thing that you can do if you're in that position to where you need to describe what that is to state what skills that you've obtained so far. This is where knowing your strengths are important, because now you can understand how to use those strengths to really build a career based on that. So the sooner that you understand what those strengths are, that can be your number one thing that you can identify and share with employers, and also use those strengths as a way to really build your career path and where you want to go. And so for entry level, building skill sets and talents and experience takes a while, but it's not just about those tangible pieces of it. It's also about what's your core, what are your values? What do you, what do you believe in? And, how are you incorporating your values into the workplace? So those are things that sometimes I like for people to think about and identify with in terms of how are my values are in line with the companies. So if they ask me, who am I? Or if I ask myself, who am I can say, well, the company's values are A, B, C, and D, and they're in line with my own personal values. And with that in mind, this is why I'm so impactful and successful in what I do. So I have a client that I work with now, and her and I were working. Well, she actually was asking me for some tips on the 30-second debut, and I gave her a tool that she could use to actually create her own based on some examples. And then we were laughing about it on the phone, and I said, "Now, wouldn't it be funny if they didn't even ask you this question?" And we both start laughing about it. And I said, but most of the time, typically they will ask you that question. So she calls me up, and I asked her how the interview went. She says, they didn't ask me. I was like, all that work and they didn't ask you who you were. So if you have an employer that doesn't ask you, about, well, tell me about Sherry, don't be alarmed with that. It's just that may not be their whole initiative to really get to the core of that piece. That's probably not really what they need to see right now. But you showing who you are in the workplace as a professional is important. So this tonight is not just about telling and saying who you are verbally, but it's about showing people in the workplace who you are as a professional as well. So, it's not about what you say all the time, it's about what you do. So if you say specifically that this is who I am, I have integrity, I work through critical problems a lot. I've been able to, save the company $5,000 in the last quarter, whatever that may be. Or I'm driven to the point to where, my career path and what I'd like to do is based around being able to describe that. Looks like somebody's getting here. Monica, is that you trying to get in?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, is that why it's black in the corner? Because I said camera off, but I didn't know it was going to do that. Okay, let me see if I can fix it.
Yeah, camera's off.
Okay.
Camera's off. But I can see your name, but that's all I can see.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Hi.
Well, hi, everybody. Monica McIntyre is on the line. She is our on the line, like we're on the phone, like she's in our She is our national network leader, and she is chiming in on tonight's topic, which is knowing who you are as a professional. I would have to say that when I talk to people in terms of their, talking about the career path or journeys, where they want to go, that is probably the question that I ask the most, and I never get an answer for. It's kind of like as soon as I ask the question, I start hearing crickets. And that's okay, because even for myself, when I was asked that question, years later after remembering having that conversation with the previous coworker, I was like, wow, I can't even tell you who I am as a professional. I can tell you who Sherry is, on a personal level, a personal standpoint. But as who I am as a professional was it's a very tough hard thing sometimes to do, because we really have to sit down and analyze what that means. Let's talk about, how do you analyze who you are as a professional? You're looking at where you are in your career, first of all, what you've experienced, and what have you gained in terms of talents and skills that you've been able to say, I've been very successful at that. And, that it's something I've been able to achieve, and it's been able to take me a long way in my career. And it's not the same for everyone. It's not the same for everyone in terms of who they are. And it can be situational, where something can happen at work and it can challenge who you are, and then you're forced with making a decision that you never thought you would have to make. For example, and I know I probably shared this story before about a company that I had went to work for, and my very first day, the lady came to the copy machine and happened to state something about another person, about their sexual preference. And I just really felt uncomfortable, because I thought, oh, wow, this is my day one, and I'm already getting hit at the copy machine with some gossip, And at that point, I was very neutral. I didn't make any comments about the statement that she made. And then once I realized who it was, and they, brought me in their office and say, hey, well, how's your first day going? It was the end of the day, and they asked me how things were going. I really felt comfortable enough to share with her how my day really was. But that was my naivety in terms of, this was my first manager role, very gung-ho about this opportunity to take my career to the next level. So I had shared with her what had happened at the copy machine. What I didn't realize is both of those ladies were best friends. So, and the other lady that had shared the gossip with me at the copy machine about her, this lady, pretty much is someone I had was an influencer in this other department that I was going to have to develop a really close relationship with. And now here we are, have this situation, and I'm having to work through that. And I'm using that as an example to say that was one of those defining moments for me in terms of defining who I am as a professional, and the decision and the choice that I made. I learned two things. One, I stayed neutral and didn't comment during the conversation about the gossip. But when I shared the information with who it was about, I should have been more discreet, or maybe not even said anything at all, because it didn't really matter. So that's what I thought about after the fact. So sometimes you have to think about what has been something in your career that has been a defining moment that has, either shifted your mindset about how you make career choices, or how you go about your communication style, how you build relationships. Those are the things that define who you are professionally, and how you can speak to who you are professionally. So that was something I learned. And from that point on, it was downhill with myself and the other person. But at the same time, it was a learning lesson for me, which at the time, I really still had not learned the lesson at the time. I didn't really reflect back on some of the things that I had experienced in that environment until I was gone. And sometimes that will happen. But the main thing is if you do have a self-reflection that happens after the fact, you need to keep that with you, the good stuff that you learn from it, and move on. The one thing that I want to share with women is that we can get stuck. And what I mean by stuck is that we can carry baggage. And Monica and I have had this conversation before about we can carry baggage from our previous jobs. So if we need to know who we are professionally so we can move on to the next stage in our career, identifying who we are, what works for us, what doesn't work, and how are we going to go about seeking out those opportunities. And then, but if we're still holding on to what this bad boss we had from 2 years ago did to us, and we're taking it to our new job, how are you going to progress? So, when you start out trying to identify who you are as a professional, you do need to think about what kind of baggage am I carrying from my previous positions. It's kind of like you had a bad boyfriend, you got ladies, and you dumped him and you moved on, but you're still mad at him kind of deep down inside, even though it was 10 years ago. Really? So you really have to think about when you're trying to define who you are as a professional, or writing it down on paper, or just being able to identify with yourself as a professional, you do need to think about, am I carrying some baggage? And in today's society, more than likely, the way the economy is, everybody has probably experienced a layoff at some point in their career, whether it was unexpected or you expected it, or maybe you were fired, whatever the case. I mean, nowadays being fired is like, oh, well, whatever, I'm getting another job next week if I can, or next year, whatever the case may be, but you can bounce back from that. And the thing is so taking what you learned from that experience, even though it may not have been the best, pull from the positive pieces of what you learned. And that is what you use to empower yourself and define yourself as a professional, and being able to speak to that. That's what's most important. And I'm not going to lie, I am so guilty of holding baggage. When I got fired from that same job I was talking about, they came in and my boss said, it's not working out, and never told me why it wasn't working out. And it was never, in my performance in terms of my, my center was number 2 in the region. My numbers were number 2 in the entire region. And but walked in and said, it's not working out. Never got an answer why. So that for me was crushing to my professional portfolio that I was trying to build, because I felt like a failure because I couldn't get an explanation as to why I couldn't do, why I was getting fired, and no one was telling me what it was I was really doing wrong. So I had to do some really deep self-reflection in terms of, looking at me and saying, okay, what's wrong with me? Am I broken? Or what could I have done differently? And that was my first taste of really having to learn how to play the game, working in the company culture and playing the game and being adaptable and knowing what the hidden workplace rules are. And the one tip for you guys who are entry level, who are looking to go into these other positions, you really don't experience the office politics and the playing the games and all those things until you get to a level of influence. When you get to a level of influence, that's when you begin to experience specific things that happen that will challenge your value system, that will, force you to try to make decisions that may go against that. So, and I hear this all the time from young people. Well, how do you, I never play politics. I never get involved with that. Well, you don't have to, because you're not at that level of influence yet to where it's going to be part of your, part of where you are, because you're still kind of in that worker bee mode. You're doing what you're told, you're meeting your objectives. You're not at that position where you're really impacting the company in that way. But once you become in management, leadership, some type of level of influence, that's when you will start to see the politics and how your value system will be not necessarily compromised unless you choose it to be compromised, but it will be tested, it will be challenged. And that's where your belief system and who you are really comes out. Do you sell yourself out? Or do you try to find some skills about yourself that you can learn how to manage where you are and then still be successful in the position and still meet your objectives in terms of your career goals? So that's something to think about in terms of how, looking at this bigger picture and, reflecting back on what are some of the things that I've been challenged with in that has really tested my core, of who I am. And, for me, and a lot of other women who are probably mid-level career or looking to make career changes, we get to the place where we don't want to compromise anymore because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to have to make these decisions based on, the company's, core values. But if you're smart, and I say this to all women, when you're making these career choices, you have to do your research, not necessarily about the company, but internally find out what really are the internal challenges that goes on within that company, because that's where your real tests are going to come from. All that fluffy stuff with the company on the outside is cute, but when you walk in those doors as a new hire, that's when the jungle's all over the place in terms of now you got to go in and find out who's your ally, who could be a possible enemy, what kind of conflicts are you maybe compromised and have to deal with, what are some of the hidden workplace rules that they have, and what is the company culture like? And, and depending on your value system and what you hold most to you, that can be something that can be quite difficult for you. So the emotional pieces of what we bring to the workplace and the experiences that we've had prior to this new job, or maybe if you've been in your job for 10 years and you've kind of been through the ringer, or maybe you haven't, whether you've had some positive or negative experiences, you need to be able to define on paper who you are professionally. For example, if you're an administrative assistant, I've been an administrative assistant for 10 years. I'm very detail oriented. I'm a strong relationship builder. I believe in open communication. I'm a lifelong learner, so I'm constantly looking to develop myself. And I've been able to achieve quite a few things, or quite in the examples of what those could be within that time frame. And so you need to know that, because knowing who you are professionally, when you get to that point where and some of us do get there, where you decide to say, well, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was there, you say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want a new career. And then you have to sit down and look at, okay, well, what is this new career? Or, what can I do differently? And those of you who want to be an entrepreneur, you've got to think in a whole different way in terms of, not only do you have to think about who you are as a professional, but then you got to bring out these personal aspects of yourself in terms of, what do I have to sacrifice, and how can I pull from how I work 9 to 5 for somebody else to working for myself, where I don't have to worry about all the other things. And am I disciplined enough to do that? So you have to think about what your strengths and your weaknesses are in order for you. Oh, look, we got a tweet. She said, I just did that ironically today. Define my professional values. All right. Thank you, Her Savvy Career. She just tweeted that she just did this today. Define her professional values. You have to define your professional values. What do you stand for as a professional? Will take you a long way. Because what happens is, all of us work in industries that everybody knows everybody. At some point, I don't care what industry you work in, there are certain circles and people know each other. So it's almost like you're building a professional brand, if you want to think about it from that perspective. And branding is not my thing, but we've got experts in the network that are good at that. But you're building your professional brand is part of this. Knowing who you are as a professional does help to build your brand. And if you want to think about it from an objective standpoint, think about it from LinkedIn. So guys, write this down, because this is something that I think can help to define, or help you to, when you look at it on paper, it can help you define it. Look at your LinkedIn profile and you type your name in, look at your LinkedIn profile, and how defined is it? That, to me, as a former HR recruiter, corporate recruiter, when I look at your HR, if I look at your LinkedIn profile, it kind of does tell me who you are as a professional. Because if you put a lot of thought and effort into sharing details about your career, your experience, your accomplishments, what you're currently doing, what you're trying to aspire to do, if you put a lot of thought into your LinkedIn profile, it does tell me a lot about who you are as a professional. Now, it doesn't give me all the internal core pieces of who you are, but it does give me an idea if you're someone that I would love to be able to give a call and bring in for an interview for an open position. So it's I think it's smart for you to really, if you want to kind of gauge, maybe how the public sees you from the standpoint of, who you are as a professional, and defining that, your LinkedIn speaks volumes to that. And then, of course, after, that's just the external piece. And then once they talk to you, you can dig a little deeper. But I think your LinkedIn is the first place that you can go and build this profile about yourself. And that can be the one place that when you get ready to sit down and build that profile, you have to think about who you are as a professional, because it's not just about putting in your employment information or your previous jobs. You have an opportunity to create and define this vision, this brand, this description of who you are as a professional through your LinkedIn page, to where when people read it, they get it. They know who you are. So that is probably one of the biggest tools that you can use from a standpoint of recruiting or, professional networking, that where people can see who you are off the top without you verbally having to say anything. But the thing is that if you can speak it, then you can put it in LinkedIn. If you can't put it in LinkedIn, you probably can't talk about it. So you definitely need to think about what that is. One thing about your LinkedIn profile is that if you're constantly in the groups, there's groups out there, lots of them professional branding that you can go into and get ideas. One of the things I always tell my clients, when they're I always work with them on their LinkedIn profiles, is to look at my profile or look at someone else's profile. Look at someone I always say, look at someone who's in your industry. Look at their profile and see what are some of the good things about it that you'd like to highlight that really will detail who you are, because you can do that through your LinkedIn page. So if you don't get anything else from this hangout tonight, if you want a good place to start in terms of wanting people to know who you are professionally, as far as the social network or professional networking piece, should I say, on LinkedIn, that's a good place to start. And then if you need ideas, or how to structure that, look at other profiles of people who do the same types of jobs in your industry, or just look at some profiles overall, and you can get some ideas that may strike up some things. And for me, that's what I did for mine. I started looking at other people's profiles. I was like, oh yeah, I do have that. I remember when I did this with that experience. You know what? I want to make sure I got that I show that on my profile. So that's a good way, I guess a sneaky way, I would say, of creating an outline for yourself of how you can explain who you are as a professional, and do it through your LinkedIn. And for all of you who are watching the hangout and you're maybe seeking a new career opportunity of some sort, or wanting to change careers, you need to get your LinkedIn needs to be on point. And you need to make sure that you are expressing your highest self, your best self, on that LinkedIn page, because it will attract employers if it's done in the right way. And then another thing too with your LinkedIn page, you can also, recommendations are huge. If you want someone to put their stamp on who you are as a professional, there is no better way to do that than have a previous coworker or a current colleague or a manager, previous or current, to speak to, working with you as a professional. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be someone that you work with. It could be, if you're working with a coach, the coach can speak to you. If you're in college, whether you're an adult learner or if you're a millennial that's in college, you can have a professor, give you a recommendation based on their experience with you in the classroom. If you volunteer for a company, they can go in and give you a recommendation based on their experience with you volunteering for their company. So the recommendation doesn't necessarily always have to be from a professional standpoint, but what it does, it still builds this professional profile for you. It builds this specific perception of you, but you control how that is perceived by how you're building this and how you're having the people that you formerly work with or currently work with, or anyone that you work with in a project, if they share, give a recommendation, it still builds credibility of who you are as a professional. So I would say right now, for those of you who have a LinkedIn page and you're not utilizing the recommendation piece, start going in there and finding previous coworkers, managers, colleagues, current and present and past, and start asking for recommendations, and give recommendations too. So if they give a recommendation to you, then you do the courtesy of giving a recommendation back to them as well. And it's kind of like this, the kind of a rule of thumb. It's just the kind of like the right thing to do. They give you a recommendation, you give one back as well. So it's kind of like like I said, it really is just the right thing to do with that. But LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways that you can do that. And a lot of times too, this kind of goes into the professional branding piece. I didn't want to go right into the professional branding part because it's, you can do it without really putting so much thought into that. But this is really more, tonight's Google Hangout is more about the internal pieces of knowing who you are versus putting it all on paper. But I just think LinkedIn is a good place to start to kind of help define what that could be for you. So one of the things I want to talk about is the salary piece. Let's get down to the money. Money. Let's get down to the money part when it comes to professional worth. I know that we've had conversations before about negotiation, salary negotiation. And I think that as African American women, we don't know our worth. Now, I'm not saying all of us, so girlfriends don't get mad, because some of us do, but not all of us know our worth. So, and what I mean by that is that when it comes to getting a position, and we're afraid to ask for a specific amount of salary at the table, we just kind of take what we can get and we run with it, thinking if we do come back and counter offer, that they're going to decline and say, you know what, or they're going to come back and take the offer back, which is not always true, because it's not about what you say, it's how you do the negotiation. Couple of places I recommend that you go, and a lot of you probably already know about these, and there's salary.com, and then there's glassdoor.com. Now, Glassdoor gives a salary, but what I love about Glassdoor is that Glassdoor does a couple of things. It gives, people can go in and anonymously give reviews on companies. I love that. I love that, because when it's time to find a new job, or if there's somebody's calling you for an interview, Glassdoor.com is the first place you need to go, because then you can go in and see what either current or former employees are saying about this company, and it also rates them 5 stars. So, if they come back and this company has 2 stars, I definitely would be looking at the reviews and seeing what they're saying. Now, it doesn't mean that someone can't get on there and say something malicious. However, you have to use good judgment and know that if they have 50 reviews and consistently 40 of those 50 are negative and maybe have some kind of similarities, there's a problem. So I think that that's a good place to go. But not only do they have the reviews, but they also share their salary of the positions that they were in. So it asks from, when they do the review, it pretty much asks them how much they made in that particular role. So it kind of gathers that data, so you can kind of get an idea of what that company pays on the average for those roles. So salary.com is good because it gives you the comps based on your education experience and the market, the city, because we all know cities pay different based on cost of living. But the Glassdoor, to me, the combination of both of those are valuable, because here you are getting reviews on the company, feedback from actual current or former employees, and then you can also get relevant current salary information based on the current or previous employers, so you can kind of have an idea of specifically exactly what that employer pays on an average. So those are things I think are good for you to look at in terms of the negotiation process for a new position. Now, if it's an internal job you're looking at, whether it's lateral or promotional move, then absolutely still do the same thing. Because regardless of the fact that you're internal or not, there still is a salary median for that job. And sometimes employers will, depending on the job, try to pay higher for external than internal. And then some companies will pay more for the internal than an external. It just depends. So just do your research when it comes to knowing your worth, when it comes to what you feel like you're worth salary-wise. Because they really cannot gauge your skill level and in terms of the intensity of how you work until you get the job. They can only go off of what they see in the resume and how well your personality showed during that interview process. So that's something to think about when it comes to your worth, when it comes around the salary part. Now, one thing I want to highlight when it comes to your worth is when we make mistakes, and I talked about the baggage part earlier, but when we make mistakes in our career, they don't necessarily have to be looked at as a setback. Okay, don't look at them always as a setback or a failure, because part of this growth process that we have in terms of knowing who we are as a professional is that we have to make those mistakes so we can stay consciously aware of what not to do when we get to another place. So, for example, I had an interview for a job, and the manager asked me, "What's the biggest mistake you ever made?" I knew right off the top of my head what that was. And I thought, do I tell him really, or do I not tell him? But I thought, I have nothing to lose by telling him the truth, because the outcome of what I did, the outcome from that was successful. So I did share what that huge mistake was, which really could have cost me my job, because I literally went into her office and said, do I need to pack my bag today? Do I need to clean my desk off today? Because I know that was a huge mistake I made, and I own up to it. I understand if you want to let me go, but they didn't let me go. But it could have been that. But I did share with them what had happened, because it really was an honest mistake. But sometimes honest mistakes can cost you your job. So the outcome of what happened was positive. So I felt good about sharing the story. But what happens when you have a mistake that you make and the outcome isn't good, and you don't want to share the story because you feel like a failure, or you feel like you feel shamed? What I say is that you still share the story, because regardless of the fact that if your outcome was positive or negative, you still learned something from that. And learning something is better than learning anything and repeating that same mistake. So the triumph comes in learning from the mistake, and then it's helping to mold you as who you are as a professional. Because trust me and believe me, after I made that mistake, I was on point. It was on point from then on. So you really have to look at this. Your mistakes you can turn your mistakes into triumphs. It may not be necessarily with that particular job, but your next job, you definitely can turn that former mistake into a triumph in a whole different way. And that's a story you can share about who you are as a professional because of your attitude and how you were able to overcome that. Those are the things that you need to think about in terms of who you are. What have you overcome? What are you looking to achieve? What kind of drive do you have to get there? Do you give up really easily? Or are you one of those people that, you stay in your grind with things? So it's just a matter of, where you are, where you want to be, and how you want to tell people who you are when in part of this journey in the process. Waiting on some questions. Anybody have any questions that they want to ask, specifically around identifying who they are, as a professional, or if you've ever been asked that question before, how did you answer that? And if you're like at that place right now where you don't know and you want help knowing who you are as a professional, and then email me at ssims@bcwnetwork.com, and I'll be more than happy to help to take you through that journey of defining who you are as a professional, and taking it from there. Now, I know that the last couple of Google Hangouts, I've been talking about the Strength Finder assessment. And the reason why is because, strength-based coaching, strength-based, career development is something that we're going to be implementing throughout the network as a benefit to our members. And so I believe in it solely in terms of, knowing what your top 5 strengths are can really help to identify you as a professional too, in a way of, are you a strategic thinker? Are you an influencer? Are you a relationship builder? Are you an executor in terms of your leadership style? Because regardless if we're in a leadership role or not, all of us have some sort of leadership ability. And a leader doesn't always have to lead to be a leader. And, so that's something that you need to think about too, is that a leader doesn't always have to lead to be a leader. You could be an entry-level worker working on a team of 4 people, and you know how to collaborate with others, you know how to work with a consensus, you know how to problem solve, you know how to offer solutions. Those things, even though you may not be in a leadership role, if you're working in a group or you're a coworker or a colleague, that's leadership ability. So those are things that you can think about in terms of who you are as a professional, honing in on who you are. But your strengths help to do that. And I know we talked about strengths 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the skills, the talents, and the knowledge is what makes up a strength. But the thing is that that's important for you to recognize what they are, because that is also a part of how you could define yourself as a professional as well, is knowing what those innate strengths are, what you're knowledgeable at, and what are your skills? What is it that you do every day so well because you've been doing it repetitiously for the last 10 years, makes you good at it. So those are some things that you can identify with in terms of, understanding who you are as a professional. And just to kind of recap on that, is one is reflecting back on your work experience. What has been some of the defining moments in your career that has helped you say, this is who I am as a professional? Whether it was working with a bad boss, maybe you had a project that you were so scared to get up and speak in front of 10,000 people, and you overcame that fear. So now you can talk to people, 10,000 people with the back of your hand now. So it's about accomplishments, what you've achieved, what you've been able to overcome. And then, of course, looking at your future and what you want that to look like and the choices that you're making in your career to make that happen. And then there's going to be those little humps and bumps along the way. And in terms of our career, not everybody experiences setbacks. But if you do experience a setback, don't look at it as a failure. Look at it as a way to come back 10 times stronger. And that's what makes you, this superstar, that you can be, by being resilient in your inner strength, your core of who you are as a professional, and that identity. One of the things I always tell my daughter is never let someone tell you who you are. I can't tell you who you are. You know who you are. And excuse my language, you know who the hell you are. So honestly, you need to think about that. You know who you are. So when you're in that, having that review with your manager, and they're saying A, B, C, D about you, and they want you to work on these weaknesses, and you're like, I'm gonna manage them, but they're not going away. And identify how you can work on those strengths. That's how you overcome. That's how you empower yourself, by recognizing what's great about you and finding a way in your roles to work in those innate talents and gifts and those strengths. And that's how you define, that's how you can explain who you are as a professional as well. And just being confident and sure about that. But you never let a manager or someone else define who you are, because they don't know the core of you. They're only going on a perception of what they see every day in the workplace. And you may not be giving your best self based on whatever the circumstances may be, but you're in control of how you change that and what you do to make that difference. And part of that is learning, making sure as far as I got one here, mastering a skill in terms of what are you going to be good at and what's going to set you apart. So, it's really hard sometimes for people to really say, I don't really know who I am as a professional, because you really have to think about what that means, for what that means for you. And just as long as you can define it and you don't allow your work environment and the people that you work with, or your workload, or whatever the case may be, to really don't let that define. Do not let that define who you are. You define it by doing the work and digging deep, being aware of what your skills, the knowledge, the talents that you have, what you've accomplished, the negative things that you've overcome, because all those things do shape and mold you. But don't allow yourself to have baggage, because just like a bad boyfriend, just because John did you wrong doesn't mean that Bob's going to do you wrong. So that means just because ABC company did you wrong doesn't mean that the next new job is going to do you wrong too. So you can't take the baggage to the next place, because if you do, you're going to find yourself repeating the same mistakes over and over. It's just kind of like in life when, you've got this thing going and they say, the words break the cycle. Sometimes you have to break the cycle when it comes to your workplace baggage too, because if you don't, you're never going to get past that place to really define who you are as a professional. Deep inside what you want to put up with and what you don't, but you got to write down what are the 5 things that make up your core value system as a professional. For me, the 5 things that make up me as far as my values as a professional is being able to have creativity, freedom to have creativity, being able to have a voice, be heard in where I am. I want to be able to work in integrity and work with others who also not only can I trust, but trust me in terms of to do my job. I can't stand a micromanager, and I probably don't know anybody in this video, probably on this Google Hangout, that probably likes to work for one. I don't like micromanagers, but I also do. And so for me, I don't like managers who are also hands off, because to me, hands off managers are not accountable. They try not to be accountable either. They kind of leave you to kind of figure it out. So I like someone who is engaging and hands-on, and you can be a hands-on manager without micromanaging. You just kind of want to, I like someone who can roll up their sleeves and jump in and do the work with me. And so those are some of the things that you need to be able to identify about who you are as a professional overall. I don't like bad bosses. I don't like bosses who like to withhold information from you and make you look bad, or they want to, leave you out of all the important meetings. And you need to be able to identify with those type of people, knowing specifically who you are, what you're not going to tolerate, and then being able to, navigate through that. One of the things I don't like about myself, I don't like small detailed stuff. I can work with the big detailed stuff, but I don't like the itty bitty minute stuff that you have to do. And so I try to have other people help me to do that. But I know that about myself. Now, when I was younger, I would try so hard to try to do all that, and I would constantly fail. And then, as I got older, I said, you know what, I have to accept that that's just something I'm not good at. And try to find a different way to work around that. So make your list, what's the, your values, integrity is huge for me. I don't need your loyalty. I just need you to tell me the truth. They had to me, these little thing loyal. I don't need all that. I need for you to be honest with me, because honesty is how we're able to work through challenges. That's how we're able to, achieve these goals, is having that the honesty there is important. Is important for me. And I have some people, their value system, they like people who are very, driven in terms of structure. They want someone who, they want to be able to work with people who believe in, this is the way it's done. We're not going to steer from that. We're going to go buy the book, and you're going to go buy the book, and we're going to do this together. I'm not a by the book girl. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there, you're probably not, some of you are probably not by the book kind of people either. I know myself in terms that, I don't think that there's just one way to get things done, or there's just not one process to get the same result, that there's different ways that you can do things and still get the same result. Or, it just may be a different way to do that, because I may feel better doing it a different way. So I like to have that room room to be able to do things in various different ways. So I'm just sharing you some of the details about myself to give you an example of how you need to think about who you are, as a professional. I know for myself, I'm very creative. So if I tell people, when I was working for others, that don't worry about the graphics, I'll do them. Because I can look at the vision and I can get it clear, concise, and I'll do the graphic. Or if we had a poster or a flyer, or we were doing an HR event or some type of, something for diversity, they would always come to me. the managers would come to me if they want to do something small for their teams and say, Sherry, can you make this flyer for me or make this poster? Because they like the way mine was presented. So those were also still things that are small and minute, not minute, but they're small things within what you do that help you to stand out and know who you are as a professional. Maybe someone's great with numbers, so they come to you to help you figure out, some of their things that they need to get their budget for the year. And that you may not even be in accounting, but because you're good with numbers where you are, they come to you for help with that. So this identifying with some of those things is how you can go in and explain who you are as a professional in an interview. But not only that, if you're going into your review with your manager, those are good ways for you to say, hey, you know what, I've done some self-reflection and I've identified these strong areas about myself, these weaknesses. This is how I want to start developing my strengths, and this is how I want to start managing my weaknesses. And really taking ownership of empowering yourself to be successful, not only in your current role, but moving forward in your career. Because I always say, and I think I say this in every hangout because I like to say it because it's true, you have to look at the role you're in now and don't think that's your stopping point. Learn what you're supposed to learn from the job that you're in now. And then when it's time to go and take it to the next level, do that. Don't stay if you know that, the playtime is not what it used to be. You don't want to get stuck. I got a question. All right. You guys are not talking tonight. I don't know what's up. This is my resume needs a complete makeover. What websites or tips can you suggest for this task at hand? Well, a couple things. You can send it to me and I'll look it over for you. But you also, and this is so cheesy, but it's true and it's simple. Okay. I go to monster.com and I go to Career Builder. And they have samples of resumes for different industries that are on there that you can look at. Another place that you can go is your local university. If you have a friend or someone who goes to that school, you can go to their career development office in that at your local university, and they'll probably have a booklet that will have sample resumes in it that you can also look at that. But if it just needs a complete makeover, then just email it to me at sims@bcwnetwork.com, and then we can look at doing an overhaul. I mean, that's what being in the network is all about. That's what part of being in BCWN is about, is us being able to support you in your your career development or your career success, and looking at that. And maybe we can even dig in to to finding out specifically, what do you want in your next career, your career goals, your next career to be. Okay, my footing went to sleep on me. I got to take it down. Oh, okay, there we go. So yeah, what do you want your next career goals to be? So that, I can also talk to you about that, because that's what we're here for. And you're welcome. You're welcome. She said thank you, so you're welcome. So I'm just trying to get you all to look at, who you are as a professional in a different, in a completely different way. And, I'm not quite sure what you guys are probably expecting when you got on the hangout tonight, that, I'm not giving a lot of defined tips. But what I want you to do is I want it to be more thought-provoking, where you're really thinking about some of your work experiences and how you can pull from those, so you can describe based on what you have experienced, to really explain who you are as a professional, because really that's what defines you. Just like how our childhood defines who we are as adults, our workplace experiences do define who we are as professionals. We do bring in part of what we bring into ourselves in terms of our personal values. We do bring part of that into who we are as professionals, but then we develop specific things about what we like, what we don't like, what we're good at, what we're not good at along the way. And so that's really where you can sit down and think about, okay, what are my core values? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where do I want to be in 5 years? How am I going to talk about who I am? And then how am I going to define this career path based on what I know about myself? And making career choices that are going to get me there. So that means stop making career choices for the money. And I said that a couple weeks ago. I mean, I know we have to pay the bills, but make the career choices based on how, your strengths, your weaknesses, and then your ability to be successful in that role. And then making sure that company culture is a fit, and that, whatever games that may be going on there, where's your value system on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of, how well do you play the game? And I'm talking about for people who are working in the corporate environment, of course. So that's something to really think about in terms of, where you want to be with that. So it's not a hard thing to do. It's not a hard thing to do in terms of reflecting back on your experiences. And there may be some women out here now saying, well, Sherry, I really haven't had any bad experiences in my career. That's great. Then you should be right where you need to be on track in terms of in your career, where you are working in your strengths, managing your weaknesses, you're working in your purpose, your talents, your gifts. You should be happy. And if you're not happy, and why? Is it because of the job? Is it because of the work environment? Is it because of a bad boss? Or if it's because of your workload? What are those things? And if that's the case, how are you going to go in and manage all of that? So that's just something to think about when it comes to being able to define that. We've got a couple minutes left. It's almost 9 o'clock. One thing I want to share again is that we can next week I am having and I did this last week, and the women are like, are we gonna do it again this week? And I'm like, no, we're gonna do it next week, every other week. But real career talk, real answers with Sherry. So the teleconference call where I'm on there live on a teleconference call during your lunch hour from 12 to 1 Eastern Standard Time. And I'm just answering your questions right then. Whatever your burning career question is, I'm on the phone, ready to answer it. So that's a good way for our women who may have something currently going on that they need to kind of see how they can resolve it right then. It's just a good way to be able to connect. So just want to let you guys know that we have that coming up. We do have another virtual career conversation coming up on November 19th. That career conversation is going to be with a brand strategist and career management coach named Venice Johnson. She is in San Francisco, California, and she's going to be on our Google Hangout as a guest talking about, girl, get your career straight. Okay. Get your career straight, girl. So she's going to be talking about ways to identify, what could be going on, and then how to make some positive changes. And she does do branding. So this is a good time to probably, get on the Google Hangout and get some of your questions answered in terms of, professional branding with her. And then we're going to have another virtual career conversation coming up. Right after that, I think on the 11th, I'm not sure. But anyway, not sure what the topic's going to be, ladies, just yet. But we'll make sure we get it out there for you, when it comes. So, you guys, I want you guys to go out there, tweet your experience of the Hangout. This Hangout is going to be available for replay tonight, right after we hang out, after the Google Hangout is over. It'll probably be downloaded in a few minutes, and you can kind of go back and replay it, write some notes, some talking points, and then also to share it with your friends and share the network with your friends. Let them know that we're here to support, career development and success for Black women. This is a place where we can come and we can talk the way we want to. Ain't that right? The way we want to. So until next time, in 2 more weeks, my last words for you guys are this: discover your strengths, know your worth, and remember one thing, okay? You are who you are, and never let someone tell you who you are. All right, I see you guys. I'll talk to you next Tuesday on our real career talk, real answers. Until then, have a good night. Bye.